smoother and more cordial. I mean, we're all suckers for that stuff. You know, I mean, think about like the best recruiters. I remember sitting with Bobby Bowden, and within 2 minutes, the late, great Bobby Bowden, within 2 minutes, I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is why this guy had powerhouses for 15 years. So I've seen plenty of guys where I'm like, this is awful. You know who was terrible at it? Do you remember Lane Kiffin's first presser with Tennessee?
Yeah.
It was awful. And you know what? It doesn't matter because he can coach and he can call plays, and now we sort of embrace the awkwardness.
Yeah, that's a good take. So you've always been the only person ever born in Massachusetts who's honest about the Patriots, and I always love you for that. I said the other day, I went back to 2015, and every year for 6 years leading up to this year, if you had a top 2 rated O-line and a top 3 running back production, the quarterback became less relevant, starting with Cam, into Goff, into Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, into Baker Mayfield last year, into rookie Dak Prescott, Jimmy Garoppolo, Niners. Top 2 O-line, top 3 running production, quarterback becomes much less relevant. And I look at this Patriot O-line, and I look at that running back depth, and I'm like, I got to be honest, they're not going to ask Mac Jones to do a ton. Are they maybe, for the first time in our lives, a little undervalued in New England this year?
Yeah, maybe. I'll go with that because you're absolutely right. I mean, the O-line grades out really well, and the running back position is depth. It's also, I think, different types of players back there.
Yeah.
You know, they've added tight ends. I mean, there's a ton of maybes at receiver still, which, you know, I don't know what their obsession with that is. I think when they played that inside passing game where they had guys on short routes and getting free off the line of scrimmage and they would just dominate everybody, I think Brady had a hell of a lot more to do with that than anybody else has. But here's what I'd say about Mac Jones. Like, the preseason is irrelevant. I think Cam's lack of availability factored into this, but I think Mac also was competing against Cam that hasn't been great in the last couple camps, and we saw how bad it went last year for a bunch of different reasons. So is Mac the guy because he's this next amazing rookie quarterback or this guy who's going to run the franchise for 10 years, or is he being compared to Cam Newton that feels like he's going in the wrong direction? And there's another number I think that's scary for Pats fans, even though I agree with you on the personnel. Josh McDaniels in the 4 seasons as an OC or a head coach without Tom Brady, points per game, it's like 18th, 19th, 24th, and I think 32nd. So I don't expect a ton of offense because the other component with that we have to factor in, especially when you're talking about the Garoppolo years, because some of those Garoppolo split numbers are crazy. You're like, wait, is Shanahan terrible without Garoppolo? And then you're like, wait a minute, I don't even know if Garoppolo is that good. Is the defense going to be there? Because of all the opt-outs, the money that they've spent on it, New England should be good enough defensively, I think, to be competitive, to be around a 500 team. But if you start talking 10 wins, that seems a bit like a stretch, especially when you look. It just looks like Buffalo's far more stable than any other team in that division.
You know, it's interesting. I think you and I probably like the same teams. I think the AFC is easier to predict because you have so many great young quarterback, good coach combos, and in the NFC, it's a lot of, Brady's great. Is Arians? I think he is. There's a lot of, you kind of think stuff, So let's say Tampa's the best team in the NFC, personnel-wise. Who is your big challenge to them in the NFC? Because I go back and forth on this. Who's your big challenger and why?
Well, it's the Rams, and it's very simple. Like, I did this kind of quarterback NBA segment that, whatever, I was doing it, and I always think about Kevin Garnett, right? When Kevin Garnett was with the T-Wolves, he was actually considered like this huge loser, which seems impossible now, right? He's this guy. The first 7 playoff series Kevin Garnett was in, he lost in the first round. Like, imagine what we would do to a guy that was considered a top 5 player today if he had that kind of playoff resume, and that's who Garnett was. And then he goes to Boston, and you watch him every single night. I was covering that team back then, and you go, this guy's the ultimate winner. And you're like, wait, I wasn't allowed to say that before.
Right.
I'm not telling you Matthew Stafford is Kevin Garnett, all right? Stafford has never been to the Garnett level that Garnett was in the NBA. But what you're going to see with Stafford and the Rams is a completely opened up offense. And there's 2 specific numbers. Stafford, the last couple of years, against pressure, is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
And with play action is great in the NFL. Goff is one of the worst in those 2. And yet McVay was still able to finish with a top 10 offense 3 of the 4 years that he had with Goff. So if you think about the Rams personnel defensively, where you could argue they're maybe the best unit to finish the season last year, and the fact that Stafford just raises your capabilities as an offense, and that it just felt like McVay was kind of carrying Goff this whole time, that would be the one team that I'm looking at. Even though I know the division is much tougher, they probably have to go on the road to beat Tampa in the playoffs. That's the team I like because Tampa had, with everybody back and an easy schedule this year, they had probably the healthiest team we saw in the NFL in the league.
Yep, I got to ask you one NBA question. I've always kind of had a theory on any business that is labor run, and the NBA is run by players, not GMs or coaches, is when one of your stars is unhappy, keep it quiet, get on the phone, and trade him before it goes public, because you're going to lose your leverage, because players have the leverage in the NBA. And this Ben Simmons thing. Okay, after the Atlanta series, get on the phone. And then he comes out and says, I'm not going to be at camp. You lose more leverage. Now, I refuse to play for the Sixers. You lose more leverage. All he has to do now is a James Harden and say, all right, here's 3 teams I'm going to play for. And you lose all your leverage. So at some point, Daryl Morey has to move him, I think, fairly quickly. Is there a team that it works for you, that it does fit?
Yeah, no, it's tough to find a fit. I don't believe any of that leverage stuff. I just don't. I mean, yes, does it happen? I think we on the outside are hysterical about it all the time. Like, I don't think all of a sudden Ben Simmons was worth way more July 15th than he is today. I know the playoff thing was terrible, but trust me, there's still GMs that think Ben Simmons fits. But here's the difference with the leverage play and why this is different. I remember, Colin, back 10 years ago when we were working together, and the world was on fire about LeBron James leaving as a free agent. Like, people are upset about that. Now it's like, what? Like, why are you guys mad? And then I remember you did a segment, and we talked about it in the hallway, our great hallway conversations, which I still dearly miss. And, I mean, we get nutrition, we get real estate in there, stock portfolio, unbelievable. And we were talking about Melo, and you're like, well, wait, isn't Melo actually doing Denver the favor? Should we like Melo more than what LeBron did? And it's like, well, I don't know. Basically, we just don't like players doing anything where they're calling the shots. And Melo was like, I'm not coming back, so you might as well get something for me. This is so different because now we're desensitized to all that. Now, if you have a year and a half, 2 years left, you can come in out of shape and be like, hey, I want out, and I'll only go to one team. And you're the GM and owner going, all right, I guess we lose. Simmons has 4 years left on his contract. So, like, what's his leverage? Is this the first time we have a guy starting a 4-year max extension where he also can tell you where he's not going to go? Because I know his agency, his reps don't want him in Sacramento. I don't think they want him in Minnesota. They'd love to get him in California, but the 2 LA teams aren't going to count. And yes, I know Sacramento technically is in California, but I think we get our point here. So really what I think it comes down to is the staring contest between Simmons and his reps saying, I'm not showing up when camp opens up. And the Sixers saying, okay, fine. Like, we're not, Daryl Morey, whatever you think about him, he is not going to take a huge hit on an asset. But as far as the leverage and the publicity and all this kind of stuff and the timing and all these things, like, yeah, maybe he's damaged goods, but I don't know that it meant that the longer this goes and into a holdout, that all of a sudden he's going to get less by the day. I think it's just way more complicated than that. And that's why and Daryl's also asking for a ton. I mean, the trade he asked for from Golden State's an immediate hang up the phone offer. I mean, you know, Wiseman, Wiggins, and 4 firsts. I mean, I would laugh. I wouldn't even say goodbye.
Well, that's how our conversations often go when I propose one of my theories. It just hangs up. Ryan, you there? The Ringer. Ryan Russillo, good seeing you, buddy.